Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just back again with another video related to the book of Revelation. And so I'm going to go through all the chapters, but put them in a sequential order, at least the way that I understand it. And it will help anybody who is going to make an attempt to make sense of this book. It's very, very confusing otherwise. And the major buckets that I put them in are historical, modern day, and in the future. And really, once it's put into these groups and in a sequential order, it plays out like a movie, which it's supposed to be, really the entire Bible. And so, I'll do that in this lesson. Again, my YouTube channel is called The Mind of God. I put the link there, and my email in case somebody wants to reach out to me personally to ask questions. So, from a very, very high level, the book of Revelation has 22 chapters, and like I said, they're not placed in sequential order. Anybody who just reads it from beginning to end, it will be very, very confusing at best. Most likely a person will just put it down like the first time that I read it many, many years ago. It just sounded like complete gibberish, and I'm not trying to be rude to the Bible, but it just didn't make any sense at all. And so the order is very, very important, and then I've done other videos where I go into the actual, details, and I'll link those below of what it's actually referring to when it talks about, Mystery Babylon, Egypt, and all the plagues and all that kind of stuff. So I go through each chapter individually, but here I'm just going to kind of go over the grouping. But the interesting thing too, from a structural perspective, like for those people who think that the Bible was just kind of tossed around from person to person, manipulated and all that, there is an incredible amount of numerology that's in the entire Bible. And so again, for me, it's obvious that God is behind, bringing the Bible to us, and it's very, very precisely constructed. And just the book of Revelation in and of itself has numerology baked into it. The exact verses, which I go into a little bit in my other video, and then even its chapter structure. And so, like I said, it's 22 chapters. The first 6 chapters refer to God's judgment, and then there's always a 7th chapter. It's kind of sort of like the creation account. It's the spiritual aspect, it's the God aspect, what he's doing this all for. And so the first 6 chapters are judgments, or describing judgments, or leading up to the judgments. The 7th chapter is a summary. The next 6th chapter refers to judgments. And then there's a summary, chapter 14. Then there's another 6 chapters referring to judgments. And then there's a chapter 21 is a summary. The unique thing about 21 is that it's in the reverse order of 7 and 14. But chapter 7, 14, and 21 are all summaries. So you can see God uses this parallel, just like in the creation account in Genesis. 6 days of creation, and then the 7th day is resting, kind of appreciating what he's done, and so that holds as well in the book of Revelation. And the final chapter is describing the kingdom of heaven. And so we see 666 symbolism, numerology in the chapter structure as well. And, I thought that was interesting to point out. And this helps us kind of understand why chapter 7, 14, and 21 seem to be a little bit out of place from the sequence. So that's the chapter structure. Again, I want people to remember that this is what I've taught, and will continue to teach, that this is the sequence that the book of Revelation and the entire Bible supports, that there is a 7-year period of tribulation and great tribulation in the second half. It is marked, the end of the tribulation period is marked by the elect being taken away. They're delivered from the earth, and then that event is what, for me personally, proves that the God of the Bible exists. That's what I'm, quote, looking for. The Bible says all eyes will see him, even those who pierced him. And so that's going to be a time when we will first see the God of the Bible visit the earth that he's made. And so that marks the beginning of a 3.5-year great tribulation period of 2 witnesses prophesying and the gospel being preached worldwide, and plagues being loosed on the entire earth. And so at the end of that, the 2 witnesses are taken away. There is a great earthquake, and then America is burned via the other nations, and in particular Iran. And then there's the wrath of God after that, where God returns with his elect and his angels, and then there's a battle in the heavens, against those that are left on earth, which are God's left-hand side. They'll have the mark of the beast. And so this is the sequence, and I want people to remember this, refer back to this, because every chapter falls into one of these or is a summary of the whole thing, like I said. So chapter 7, 14, and 21 summarize this slide right here. 21 just goes in the reverse order. But this order is always preserved. I haven't seen anything in the Bible, in the whole Bible, that contradicts this sequence, and definitely not in the book of Revelation. So like I said earlier, 7, 14, and 21 are summary chapters. It's always the same sequence. When it describes things, it always starts with God's elect. In chapter 7, it starts with them being sealed by the angels in their mind. This would be during the tribulation period, which I believe we're living in now. I would assume that the elect are already sealed. The mixed multitude are described next, and they come out of the great tribulation period, and then there's a reference to the kingdom of heaven. So this sequence will never be violated in any passage in the entire Bible. That's why I have comfort knowing that that is the way it will go. Chapter 14, again, starts with God's elect. Then it talks about the gospel being preached worldwide during the Great Tribulation period via the two witnesses, and then the wrath of God. And chapter 21 is nuanced slightly in that it starts with the kingdom of heaven, then it talks about plagues, and then it references the 144,000. And so it's just in the reverse order, but it's still a summary chapter in that it goes over the entire book of Revelation in a broad stroke. And so those are the summary chapters. You got to kind of pull those out. To me, those are good ones just to read beforehand to kind of get a sense of what's about to happen, in the entire book. So what I call introductory chapters, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are all introductory words. And chapter 1 also describes Christ's physical appearance, that he has very dark skin. Chapter 2 and 3 are letters to the churches, and chapter 4 is what I consider kind of like the opening ceremonies of this church service of the end times. And so very, very important, setting the stage for what's about to happen. Now, to me, this, from chapter 5, beginning of chapter 5, it's talking about things that have already happened in history or in modern day, and I describe this as the tribulation period. So if it's historical, it's what I call setting the stage for this final 7-year period. And then the modern day, which is the time of tribulation or the enemy trying to deceive God's elect, which I believe we're living in right now. And so chapter 5 starts off with Christ being deemed worthy based on his sacrifice to open the book of Revelation to his saints and to loose the 7 seals. And so in chapter 6, the first seals are opened. And again, I believe those are all in the past. Chapter 8 talks about the 7th seal, which sets off another 7 trumpet blasts. And within that chapter itself, the first 4 of those trumpets go off. Chapter 9 has the 5th and 6th trumpet go off. And to me, the first 5 of these are historical, all the way up into including the 9/11 event. And then the 6th trumpet is modern day warfare technology. So this is all the money that's being printed for the last 20, 30 years to prepare all the weapons, this military industrial complex, this coordination of all the nations to create all this weaponry. First and foremost, to destroy America. Like I mentioned, that will happen. And then to fight against God himself in the Battle of Armageddon. And so that is the 6th trumpet. And that's in modern day. And so there's references to, drone technology, helicopters, and all that kind of stuff that I go through in my other video. And so those are all either happened or happening right now. And so then chapter 12 is also part of this historical and modern day period because it describes the first half of the final 7-year period in the end times. And Jesus says that this time will be cut short for the elect's sake. So it will not be exactly 3.5 years long. No one knows when it begins or ends except for the Most High. And so this is a time period where the devil will attempt to deceive really the entire world, but God's elect about ball earth, white Jesus, corporate Christianity, and the list goes on. Basically, God doesn't exist. The God of the Bible doesn't exist. And so those are all things that have either happened or are happening right now in these chapters. And you can see that it's not perfectly sequential. Chapter 10 and 11 are not there. And like I said earlier, chapter 7 is a summary chapter, and so you can kind of pull that out. But all of these combined, everything in there is tied to a historical event or something that's happening in real time, literally right now. This corona thing would be included in that as well. Part of the deception, that the government actually cares about us and all that kind of stuff. So those all can be grouped together. The next set, these to me are very, very important, and I suspect are going to begin very, very soon. And this is the Great Tribulation period. So this is what I call setting the stage and the tribulation period. And then this is the Great Tribulation period. And chapter 10, 11, 13, 15, and 16 all reference the same time period of 3.5 years. The Bible says exactly 1,260 days based on a 360-day calendar. So in chapter 10, John is told that he would prophesy the book of Revelation again to all people on earth in the end time. So it's, again, sort of a setup to the two witnesses. Chapter 11 talks about the Great Tribulation period of two witnesses, which I believe are Elijah and Moses, who will be prophesying on the streets of America. I've done, multiple videos on that. So they are going to be the focus of this Great Tribulation period, administering the plagues described in 16 and also alluded to in 18. And so chapter 13, this is a very well-known chapter. This is the mark of the beast, which will be forced after God's elect, the 144,000, and whoever my people are, men and women, after they're taken away. And this is during the period of the two witnesses. So the mark of the beast will not be forced until God's elect / my people are taken away. And chapter 15 is relatively short chapter, but it references, again, the same 7 plagues that are listed in chapter 16. And it also has a reference to Moses, who is one of the two witnesses administering the plagues on the streets of America. And chapter 6 goes explicitly into those plagues. So this is the Great Tribulation period of two witnesses, and they'll be administering these plagues described in this chapter. So 10, 11, 13, 15, and 16 are all describing that same 1,260 days. And really the summation of them together give us confidence that, the narrative is correct. And so we see it from many, many different angles. And we see the agenda, really, of God's left-hand side during that Great Tribulation period. And this will kick off, like I showed here, when God's elect are taken away. And so once this happens, then this 3.5-year Great Tribulation period begins, and it will run exactly 1,260 days. The Bible says it will not be cut short. Those two witnesses will be doing their job unobstructed, and then they will be killed at the end of that period by the beast system because of what they're doing to the entire earth. And the earth will rejoice. People that hate God will rejoice that 2 of God's most precious prophets have been killed in America. And so all of these chapters can be lumped together as the, quote, Great Tribulation period. And again, I believe this period is going to begin soon. The final 2 major sections is chapter 17 and 18, describe Mystery Babylon and it being judged and burned. And so, those two can be put together. And then chapter 19 and 20 describe Christ returning to destroy the left-hand side. So I put all those 4 together as the wrath of God. And at that time, only God's left-hand side are on the earth. I have a feeling, I suspect that early in the Great Tribulation period, a majority, if not all, of God's right-hand side, the mixed multitude, will be killed off. So, there will be relatively, short period of time where some of God's right-hand side will still be on earth, and then after that, it will be all of God's left-hand side preparing for this final battle against Christ himself. And so the final chapter, chapter 22, just describes the kingdom of heaven, and it kind of stands alone. And so this, to me, again, I just refer to this image. I want people to understand this, that without this sequence, the book of Revelation, and in my opinion, all the prophetic books and the whole Bible, Matthew 24, will not make sense, because this sequence is honored, everywhere and repeated and recited just in different ways. But it's always this sequence of events, and the book of Daniel in particular supports this timeline as well, and then puts even more specific time periods around God's wrath being 30 days and then a period of miracles for the remnant of 45 days afterwards. And so, all these books work together. It would worry me if they told a different story, but once a person has this template and understanding, then to me the book of Revelation is unlocked, and to me the entire Bible actually will make perfect sense. And so, I believe we're living in those days where we are going to see these events manifest, and the Bible says that all of these things are a way for all of us to understand and see God's judgment made manifest. So hope everyone's doing well. Take care. Bye.